So everyone, week 4 is always a bit of a bits and pieces and a bit of a jumble of a presentation because I like to cover everything that I haven't really been able to cover so far. So it doesn't necessarily have as much coherence as some of the other weeks. It doesn't really have the same kind of a theme, but I try and cover as much as possible. And these are areas that I didn't want to leave leave sort of this 4-week course without covering. So we're talking a little bit about habit change, ways we can really implement new habits if we feel like we're really stuck in old habits, the importance of sleep, which I touched on a wee bit last week and I want to look at in a wee bit more detail as well. I'm going to look a little bit at endocrine disruptors and the chemicals, environmental chemicals, how they can impact your fertility, and also have an negative impact on your weight balance. And I've also got a little section I've added in about the health of the microbiome, the vaginal microbiome and the oral microbiome and their role in fertility as well. So as I said, it's a bit of a jumble, very diverse topics, but I wanted to kind of get them all fitted in today. And as always, I'll be sending through a copy of the text of the slides as well. So hopefully, has that changed, everyone? Yeah, hopefully you're seeing the slides change. So habit change, lifestyle changes and detoxing your environment. This is really the main focus for today. So we're going to look at lifestyle for weight loss and fertility, mainly kind of the importance of sleep, how we can support habit change, like lasting habit change, and how to detox your environment from endocrine disruptors. So that's a big hot topic, the role of environmental chemicals, how they can impact your fertility. So we want to touch a little bit on that and also sort of make it seem a little bit more doable and a little bit more manageable to actually reduce your exposure to endocrine disrupting chemicals, because that can seem like a bit of an overwhelming task sometimes. So I want to start off chatting about sleep, and how I would say that sleep could be the secret ingredient for both weight loss and also supporting your reproductive health and your fertility. As I said, sleep hormone melatonin regulates our sleep cycle. However, we're beginning to understand that melatonin plays a crucial role in our fertility. And I think I mentioned last week that some US-based fertility clinics supplement with melatonin because they've seen that benefit with reproductive health for both men and women. In 1942, less than 8% of the population was trying to survive on 6 hours or less sleep a night. In 2019, about 50% of the population is. So, those statistics probably still stand. Even today, a lot of us are chronically sleep deprived. We don't prioritize sleep, and there's lots of reasons why we're not getting enough sleep. People who sleep less than 6 hours could reduce their chances of conceiving by up to half. So sleep is really important, and there's a very clear link when we look at the research between a lack of sleep and poor fertility and reduced chances of conception. So melatonin is the sleep hormone, helps to manage our sleep cycle. And it has a really important role in reproductive health. And we know this because of, again, significant body of research showing that melatonin is positive for reproductive health. Melatonin has other roles in our body that are really significant for reproductive health. It doesn't just manage our sleep-wake cycle. For example, melatonin is a really potent antioxidant. Antioxidants are those chemicals in our body that help look after the health of our cells. And we've touched a little bit on sort of egg health, sperm health, and melatonin would be really important for maintaining both that. Women who work shifts often experience menstrual irregularities because working at night or cycling between working at night and working during the day can disturb our hormone balance. Our bodies store melatonin in the follicular fluid, the fluid that surrounds follicles, developing follicles. Why is it needed there? It must be needed there to protect those follicles and ensure they develop healthily. Granulosa cells also have melatonin receptors, meaning that melatonin will lock into granulosa cells and have an impact there. We talked a little about hormones and receptors last week. So these female reproductive cells obviously need melatonin. So we know that melatonin plays a really important role for female reproduction. Men who sleep too little were found to have a sperm count that was 29% lower than those who had a good sleep pattern. And we know that in animal studies, exposure, reducing melatonin levels by exposure to light resulted in fertility rates reducing by half. And for men, testosterone is replenished during sleep, and it's used up during the day. So men tend to deplete their testosterone levels during the day, and then they're replenished during sleep. So there's this really close relationship between a healthy sleep pattern and female hormone balance, male hormone balance, sperm health, and egg health. However, how does sleep impact our weight balance? So the research also indicates that inadequate sleep can have just as negative an impact on our weight balance as our fertility. Insufficient sleep promotes insulin resistance. And we've talked about insulin resistance quite a lot over the last few weeks. And this raises insulin and blood sugar levels and also raises cortisol levels, which promotes fat storage. So poor sleep raises insulin, raises cortisol, and that is a bad recipe, as we've seen, for fat storage. A study found that followed 11 men who were only allowed 4 hours of sleep for 6 nights in a row. After this, their body's ability to lower blood sugar level decreased by 40%. So that just shows you how immediate this impact of poor sleep is on your ability to manage your blood sugar levels. A study found that people who were allowed only 4 hours sleep also consumed up to 559 more calories the next day. And again, I don't know if it's ever happened to you that there's been a night where you haven't slept for some reason, or you've only had maybe 3-4 hours sleep. Maybe you've been traveling the next day to go on holiday and you've had to get up early for a flight, and you just find the next day you're absolutely ravenous. You just can't stop eating. And that's because of the impact of sleep, perhaps, on your ability to keep your blood sugar stable. Insufficient sleep also appears to have a relationship with leptin and leptin resistance. And we talked a little bit about the relationship between leptin and sleep last week, and how leptin and leptin sensitivity is really important for our reproductive health. And individuals with less sleep were found to have lower levels of leptin, leading to reduced appetite regulation. And better sleep improved leptin resistance. So again, sleep really key for supporting weight balance. So what could be impacting our sleep patterns and impacting our ability to produce enough melatonin? So for example, blue light from smartphones, tablets, and laptops has been shown to really impact the ability of the brain to produce enough melatonin, basically signals to the brain that it's still daytime. Shift work obviously disturbs the natural rhythm of melatonin release, because you force yourself to stay awake at night every so often, kind of cyclically. If you have light in your bedroom at night, that really impacts your melatonin. You should have a really dark bedroom ideally, but also getting a lack of natural light during the day. And this is a really interesting one, because melatonin release at night is dependent on complete shutdown of melatonin during the day. So getting out into natural light during the day is really important to optimize your melatonin levels. And stress, because cortisol can block melatonin production as well. And obviously coffee and alcohol also interfere with our sleep patterns. And another thing is that we watch too much TV, or we do too many things late at night that we shouldn't be doing. We should be going to bed. And I use this little kind of image because I'm old enough to remember when sort of, 20 something years ago, is it longer ago? Yeah, longer ago, the TV used to stop at about 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. And this used to come up on BBC One. There was no more TV. You couldn't watch TV 24 hours a day. You couldn't go online. You couldn't do your shopping at 11 o'clock at night. You had to go to bed, maybe read a book, do something else. You couldn't sit up all night just for no good reason. And all these things that our modern day lifestyle feels that are normal are actually potentially disturbing our sleep pattern. Is it the 24-hour news cycle? Are we, doing emails at 11 o'clock at night? Are we shopping online? We didn't used to have anything to do after 10 p.m. So we went to bed naturally. So how can we increase melatonin production naturally when we're trying to sort of support weight balance and trying to support our reproductive health? So one thing that has been shown to really help, and I find this helps a lot with clients, is sticking to a strict sleep pattern, going to bed and waking up at the same time every day, even at weekends. So try and go to bed at the same time, get up at the same time every single day. Melatonin release at night is dependent on complete shutdown during the day, so getting out into bright sunlight. So if you do work in a dark office or a dark environment and your work environment's dark, try and go out at lunchtime for a walk to get that sort of exposure to daylight. Avoid blue light from laptops, smartphones, and tablets for at least 2 hours before bed, and try not to use your phone as an alarm clock, because then you'll be tempted to look at it. At night, you can, if you do, for example, need to work at night, you can use blue light blocking screens over your laptop, or even blue light blocking glasses. I know a lot of people who use those. You can also use foods that are rich in melatonin, such as cherries, kiwi fruit, goji berries, and walnuts. And you can actually buy a type of cherry juice called Montmorency cherry juice. And that is a really good source of melatonin. So some people will actually naturally supplement with that. It's a really good way to up your antioxidant levels too. One clinical trial found that men eating 75 grams of walnuts, so a food that was really rich in melatonin, every day improved their sperm morphology and vitality. So they found really significant improvement in those parameters. Try using natural sleep aids like magnesium bath, lavender oil, herbal teas. And it can take time and effort. It requires work to get a good sleep pattern back. It can take up to 3 months to really work with your sleep pattern if your sleep pattern is poor. And sometimes with clients, we will maybe look at more natural sleep aids and supplements that they could maybe use, that are safe to use when you're trying to conceive, maybe some magnesium or something internally, which is safe when you're trying to conceive, and that can really help relaxation, especially if you're struggling with anxiety. I'm also a huge fan of flower essences that can just help the mind switch off. If you're one of those people that tends to have an overactive mind at night and you go to bed and your mind starts to go over things, there's some really great flower essences like the back rescue remedy that are available that you could just, like little drops you just put on the tongue at night. So moving on from sleep, I want to chat a little bit about habit change and things we can do to support habit change, dietary change, or even implementing other positive habits. So sometimes the way we eat is such an ingrained habit that it is very difficult to make positive change. And this can be our own natural habits that we have taken on for various reasons, or also the habits that we're kind of exposed to either in our family unit or in society. So we want to look at why we develop certain eating habits and how we can take practical steps to change them in the long run. So we want to look at factors such as the appetite pendulum, how we eat as children, how that might impact how we eat as adults, comfort eating, saboteurs, what are the factors that could be sabotaging your attempts to change your diet, change your lifestyle, and ways we can optimize willpower to help us change our diet and lifestyle. So the appetite pendulum is actually a diagram used by the lady who has written this book, The Appetite Doctor. And this is actually a really good book if you do really struggle with your appetite, how to retrain your appetite. And she has some podcasts and online lectures that are worth looking up as well. But this is the appetite pendulum, and it's some people actually that I've worked with where they're really trying to change the way they eat. They sometimes would even put this sort of on their fridge to kind of be a reminder of, how do you feel? What way are you eating? So the idea is that whenever you're eating, when you eat a meal, you eat until you get to the +3, until you're just full. You don't go until you're very full or uncomfortably full. And, there's various reasons why we're often eating until we're uncomfortably full. It could be because we've been forced as children to finish whatever was on our plate, even though it was maybe too much. So we actually ignore a lot of the natural appetite cues that we should have. However, on the other hand, you don't also want to wait until you're extremely hungry, until you start to eat, because then you're going to overeat because you've waited until those hunger cues are too strong. So ideally, you want to wait until you're definitely hungry, this -3, before you start to eat. And whenever you're eating, eat until you're just +3, just full. So try to think of this kind of pendulum whenever you're eating. And this can be a really straightforward sort of practice that can help you just eat in a much more natural way. Are you eating sometimes because you're bored? Are you hungry? You're not sure, probably a bit hungry. Are you only ever slightly hungry? Or are you definitely hungry? On the other hand, waiting until you're extremely hungry is quite damaging as well. I know sometimes, depending on my husband's schedule, he might not come home till very late, and I'm usually starving before he gets home. So, maybe I've already started snacking before he gets home, but then I'll still sit down and eat my full dinner alongside him as well. So I've waited until I was too hungry to start to eat. Instead, I should have probably eaten my dinner earlier, let him eat by himself, because then I probably would have avoided the overeating. So just an example of a scenario that in a trap I often fall into there as well. So how do you use the appetite pendulum? So just a reminder, our body has a homeostatic system to regulate when we eat and how much, the system that regulates our appetite. So weight gain really occurs when we ignore these cues. And as I said, there's various reasons why we ignore these cues: societal reasons, family habits, etc. What happens over the years is we've developed unhelpful eating habits that can lead to weight gain. So this appetite pendulum is at the center of retraining our appetite and helping us judge our levels of hunger and fullness. So as I said, that simple rule is stop eating at +3 and wait to eat until -3, and that can help to result in gradual weight loss. And we're learning to tolerate mild hunger, which some of us maybe don't do any longer. And I said, you only need to use the scale when you think of eating and while you are eating. The rest of the time, you just get on with your life. You don't even think about it. And it helps us to stop and think about our levels of hunger and if we're really, truly hungry when we eat. This approach also fits in with an approach that favors us eating high satiety foods. If you think back 4 weeks ago to week 1, and also manages our blood sugar balance. So obviously eating high satiety foods and managing our blood sugar balance will also help us manage our appetite because we're not getting the blood sugar dips that could be leaving us eating even when we're really not hungry. High satiety foods help us to ensure that the pendulum does not swing too rapidly from feeling full to feeling hungry. And when we balance our blood sugar levels, we escape the blood sugar crashes that can make us feel that our hunger levels are up at 5, even though we've just eaten a meal 2 hours ago. And we also don't want to let ourselves become overly hungry, because when we become overly hungry at that +5 or -5, sorry, that's when our blood sugar is low and we're really going to eat fast and we're going to ignore the appetite cues. Eating slowly can also help us to use the appetite pendulum, because the more slowly we eat, the more in tune we are with how full we are while we eat. So if you're a fast eater, sometimes those natural cues just don't keep up with how fast you're eating. So how do you eat slowly? If you're not a naturally slow eater, how do you start to eat slowly? So if eating slowly doesn't come naturally to you, try and count how many times you chew each mouthful and aim for 50 chews. You won't ever get there, but the idea is to aim for 50 chews, and eventually that will slow down the amount that you eat. Try and set down your knife or fork while chewing. Otherwise, you'll be ready with the next bite. So there's research that shows people that eat with a knife and fork don't set it down in between bites, which very few of us do, actually eat much faster. So if you, for example, apply that to sort of setting down your knife and fork and concentrating on chewing, and chew slowly, and then pick up your knife and fork for the next bite. Or even if you're eating a sandwich or eating a piece of fruit, set it down while you chew, and you might find that you'll naturally start to slow down. Think about drinking your food. Ensure your food is well broken down before you swallow, and avoid those processed foods that require a little chewing. We've talked about those foods that just dissolve in the mouth without any chewing. They obviously interfere with our satiety signals and this appetite pendulum, because we're not chewing them enough. So they're not sending that signal to the brain that we're getting enough food. And eat like a small child. So I don't know, if we think about how children eat, or how maybe we used to eat when we were children, children tend to actually pay attention to the hunger cues in ways that we have been over the years educated against. So when we're young, we're more in tune with our appetite regulatory system. Just think of how a small child will refuse to eat another bite when they're full, because they're in tune with this appetite regulation system. The difference with adults is that for us, over the years, habits have formed gradually that have caused us to override the natural appetite regulation instincts. So how our habits have changed and why we comfort eat. So over the years, our hedonic system develops, and this is to do with pleasure. And this hedonic system can eventually start to override our natural appetite control system. So this is why we start to overeat or comfort eat, because these pleasure cues from our hedonic system start to override our appetite. We want to try and get back to a self-regulating appetite system. So this is why we can keep eating these very high-fat foods, sugary foods, because they release that hedonic system. You can even sort of add on to this those processed foods that have got things like MSG that are really palatable, that taste really delicious. Those can also stimulate our hedonic system, so we can eat them beyond sort of fullness, because we get that pleasure control, that pleasure reward system is stimulated by them. And why we comfort eat or eat too much. So for one reason, we're encouraged to always clear our plate, even if we're full up. I know whenever I was at school, there was a dinner lady in the school canteen, and if you didn't clear your plate, even if you were full up, you had to keep eating until your plate was clear, or you weren't allowed to go out and play in the in the playground after your lunch, you know, and you know, I don't know if that still happens nowadays, but that happened to us. So you were forced to eat, you know, every day, pretty much eat the same amount, no matter what your hunger was, your hunger level was. What was your parents' attitude to mealtimes? For example, were you told if you eat all your vegetables, you can have a biscuit? That makes us think that veg is a negative food and sweet treats are a positive food. So you know, psychologically, we came to see biscuits, sweet foods, it's comfort food, and vegetables as kind of a food that was sort of a responsibility that you had to eat. And the biscuits were the reward. Was food used as a reward for good behavior or to cheer you up when you were sad? You know, did you fall, cut your knee, and you were given chocolate to cheer you up, or an ice cream? All of these factors, which, I mean, they're very normal. My parents did this with me, were behaviors that made us start to associate sweets with feeling good. And that established our comfort eating behavior. So that's why nowadays we reach for a chocolate biscuit or a bar of chocolate or an ice cream or a tub of ice cream when we feel sad. Because over the years, we had this sort of psychological programming to think of these as foods that would make us feel better. And why do we eat when we aren't hungry? So there's 5 main reasons that we eat when we are not really hungry. So there's the habitual reasons. Do you have a cup of tea and a biscuit mid-morning with the people in work and, you know, have a bit of a chat and a gossip? So, you know, every day of the week, you'll do that. Even if you're not hungry and you don't really want it, you're going to have it. Is it opportunistic? Is it just because it's there? You know, does your next door neighbor come over with some chocolate cake that they've baked? And just because they've given it to you, you can't waste it. So you're going to eat it up. Insurance, are you trying to avoid hunger later on? So you're maybe eating bigger meals, bigger than you actually want, because you think you might be hungry later on. Emotional eating, so comfort eating or binge eating, obviously can come in there. And cravings, so do you crave sugar, for example? And obviously blood sugar balance comes in there. Do you crave coffee? So you're going for like a coffee with a syrup in it. And obviously blood sugar balance or blood sugar imbalance can really dictate, are we craving foods? So how do you break these habits? What are really, you know, key ways that we can break bad eating habits? So we can remove temptation from the house. So this can help to reduce the amount of habitual or opportunistic eating that occurs. Do you really need to keep biscuits, chocolates, crisps in the cupboard? Try and eat high satiety foods and balance blood sugar, which we've talked about quite a lot over the last few weeks. This will help to prevent excess hunger and cravings and will work to ensure that you avoid hunger in the future. And emotional eating, you identify, is a habit that follows, emotional eating is a habit that follows the cue behavior reward cycle. So the emotions are the cue and the eating is the behavior, and the reward should be that we feel better. But we often don't feel better after emotional eating. And maybe we need to look at other methods to deal with emotions. You know, sometimes is it go out for a bit of a walk, do some deep breathing, breathe in some essential aromatherapy oils. If you do find that you're emotional eating, you do try and identify, do you actually get any benefits for it? Do you feel any better? And then try and maybe identify other habits that you can put in place that actually make you feel better when you feel emotional. And what are your saboteurs? So saboteurs are factors that can get in the way of you making positive change in your diet and lifestyle. You know, 1, do you have a lack of motivation? 2, do you feel like you've got a lack of willpower? Do you have a lack of self-belief? And that can stem from your feelings of self-esteem and your self-image and your confidence. Is there pressure from others around you, you know, for eating, you know, trying to get you to eat, you know, a chocolate bar, go on, have a treat, go on, have a biscuit, come on, let's get a takeaway. You know, are other people interfering with your ability to stay on track? And we all have different saboteurs. We just have to recognize them. So how do you block out these saboteurs? So if your saboteur is motivation, try and remind yourself daily why you want to make these changes. Visualizing what you want to achieve can be helpful, or write down your motivation so that you can go back and reread it. So even vision boards can be very good for motivation as well. Do you have lack of self-belief or self-esteem? Sometimes affirmations can be very helpful. If you don't believe you're capable or worth it, then put up a little sign or poster on the fridge telling yourself you're capable, or have an affirmation that you repeat every time you stop at a red light or get a phone call. And that can really work because you're just really reinforcing your ability to do something. Is there pressure from others? And that would probably be the biggest saboteur that I see. with people. You know, other people refusing to eat the same food or encouraging us to break our habits is very common. If you have a persistent saboteur, is it a friend, family member, or your partner? Have a chat with them about how their behavior is impacting you. They probably don't realize it, and they need to put your needs first. And how do you optimize willpower? And first of all, the first step is understanding how willpower works. And that's one of the best ways to optimize our willpower. We don't have an endless amount of willpower. It's an energy that depletes as the day goes on, and it replenishes during sleep. So that's why you might find willpower is less available in the evening and at night than it is when you, and that's the time of day when you struggle most with dietary change. So are you usually quite good at you're having your breakfasts and you resist chocolate and sweets all day, but by nighttime, that's when you sit down on the sofa, that's when you're least able to resist, you know, something sweet or, you know, a piece of chocolate or a treat. So, you know, realizing that the evening might be the worst time for you. So how do you optimize willpower and make sure that you keep eating well in the evenings? So plan or pre-cook evening meals so you're less likely to end up with a takeaway or a ready meal when you're tired and willpower is at its lowest. Batch cook, menu plan, and maybe get in the habit of making the same meals regularly to reduce the amount of effort that goes into planning your evening meal, and remove the opportunity for snacking in the house. Don't keep junk food in the house. I always say to people, if you really struggle with that sugar craving after dinner, stock the cupboard up with like a variety of maybe herbal teas that are quite sweet. It could be like a berry tea or a cinnamon or a chai, and go for that instead when you're sitting watching TV, and that can just really help to satisfy those sugar cravings. So how can we support habit change? So when we're trying to change a habit, we have to think of the cue, behavior, reward pattern. We must make changes that ensure that we still end up with the same reward. So we end up with a reward at the end. For example, in stress eating, the cue is stress and the reward should be to mitigate stress. So we need to find a new behavior that we conduct in response to stress that will reward us. Could this be exercise, meditation, or deep breathing, or maybe aromatherapy? Identify small steps that will help you achieve your end goal. For example, if your end goal is to eat more vegetables, then the first step might be research some vegetable recipes you want to try and then meal plan around them. Or maybe your first step would be to have a veg box delivered to your house every week, or stock the freezer perhaps with lots of frozen veg. So we can make that goal that much easier to achieve. And this is a wonderful book called Atomic Habits by a guy called James Clear. And if you do really struggle with habit change, going through this book and actually he has lots of little activities that he does at each chapter can really help you put in place habit change. Do you struggle to make changes to your lifestyle and break the cycle of bad habits? Sometimes we struggle to make long-term changes in our lifestyle, be that exercise, eating better, or getting more sleep. And as I said, I really highly recommend this book. So how to change habits for good. And this is just a bit of a snippet for some of the things that are covered in this book. So for a start, is change your mindset. Do you say to yourself things like, I can't cook, I don't have time to cook, or I've always had a sweet tooth, or I've never been sporty, or I've always been the heavy one in my family? You know, so your mindset is already getting in the way of you making positive change. Because if you say, oh, I'm not a natural cook, but I'm trying, that's already a more positive way of thinking about yourself. Or, you know, I'm not a great cook, but I can make something simple. I can get dinner on the table. That's a really important first step in making the habit change. Like, I've never been sporty. I didn't enjoy sports at school, but actually I really enjoy just exercising by myself. It gives me that really, you know, it's really good me time. Or I like to add in exercise as a social thing with friends. Or I've always struggled with the sweet tooth, but I'm really trying to combat it. You know, instead of just defeating yourself already with the mindset, try and see what are the things that actually stand in your way of making positive change. Are you already having those negative thoughts before you've even begun? You know, just think, and also don't let others define you either. I think sometimes we let our family or our friends define us in a certain way. And we kind of get stuck in that rut. You know, just do you think, you know, what is a positive change that you want to make for yourself? and then start to just make that positive change in your mindset. And change has to be easy and it has to be desirable. So, how can you make these lifestyle changes easier for yourself? For example, if you want to start cooking breakfast every morning and having a better breakfast, would it make things that much easier if you set out all the utensils and even setting out some ingredients that can stay outside the fridge? So everything's just sitting there ready to go first thing in the morning when you get up. Do you leave your workout gear sitting on the bed so you can change into it when you get back from work? Or meal prep? These are just things you can do that just make these changes that much easier. And how can you make it desirable? Sometimes the benefits of habit change can be slow to show the benefits, and that is usually the case, I would say, with nutrition and with dietary changes. Sometimes it can be slow. Changes can be slow, and that's where it can be easy to give up. So how can you motivate yourself to keep going when results are slow? Do you keep yourself motivated with a treat to keep going? Will you buy yourself something if you stick to diet and lifestyle changes every day for a month? Do you give yourself a reward chart, even if it's like a star in your diary, and then say, oh, at the end of the month, I'll buy myself that top. Or, if I stick to this, I'm going to, I don't know, go for the cinema, or, identify something that would be really good to motivate yourself and try and help focus on that, because sometimes the benefits are invisible for a long time, and then all of a sudden you'll start to see those benefits. And how do you show up consistently? So making small changes every day is what builds up to massive changes over months. So every day you make a small change, you're telling yourself that this is your new identity. So even exercising for 10 minutes daily, you're slowly changing your mindset. You become someone who exercises every day. And it changes how you think about yourself. You become someone who exercises, essentially. You don't have to be perfect, just consistent. And I always tell my clients, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I think this is a big thing as well. I always get questions like, oh, what's the best form of exercise for me to do? And there are optimal forms, but sometimes it's just moving your body every day for 10 minutes. And that can be the first place to start. Don't follow the crowd. Do you struggle with others around you interfering with your ability to make change? Do people at work try and convince you to eat a bun or a piece of cake, even though you've told them you don't want it? Or does your significant other complain when you try and cook more balanced meals? So it's really important to sort of try and step away from those external factors that could be interfering with your ability to make change, and try and move away from those. So moving on from habit change, I'm going to take another detour to a completely another topic, and I wanted to talk about environmental chemicals and how they can interfere with our physical health, our reproductive health specifically, and potentially also impact weight balance as well. A really important topic that I didn't want to sort of come to the end of this 4-week course without covering. So what if our environment, and not just changes to our diet and lifestyle, has negatively impacted our reproductive health? Our environment over the recent years, over recent decades, has changed massively. And this, I believe, is a major factor impacting our reproductive health and seemingly outside of our control. So what is this environment that we're exposed to, and the chemicals that we're exposed to this environment that could be impacting our reproductive health negatively? So it's the air we breathe, the food we eat, the chemicals we put in our skin and in our cosmetics and skincare, and any chemicals that we might be exposed to through our work, for example. So environmental interference with our fertility. So the decline in fertility rates that we've seen over past decades cannot be attributed just to changes in lifestyle alone. So it's not just lack of sleep, it's not just stress, it's not just dietary changes that are interfering with our fertility. It is our environment. There is no doubt about that. We must recognise that our exposure to harmful chemicals in our environment has also potentially played a huge role in negatively impact fertility levels. Many of the chemicals act as xenoestrogens. So that means these are chemicals that are so similar to estrogen that our body recognizes them as estrogens. So xeno means foreign and estrogen means estrogen, so foreign estrogens, but they can come into our body and lock into our estrogen receptors. Environmental estrogens expose our bodies to chemicals that they don't really know what to do with, and these are extra estrogens on top of what our body is already producing, can disturb the natural balance of hormone in our bodies. These chemicals affect both men and women. However, women are exposed to more chemicals and we tend to absorb and store them more easily. Women have more fat tissue than men naturally, and that is where we will store a lot of these environmental chemicals. So it's really important to be aware of that. Exposure to some of these chemicals is outside our control, but really important to realize there is a lot we can control and reduce, and we can make significant impact on our exposure to these chemicals in a way that will really support our fertility and our reproductive health. So what are xenoestrogens? As I said, these are environmental chemicals that are foreign to our body, but they are so similar in structure to estrogen that our body picks up on them as if they're estrogen. So just this is the diagram that shows you that xenoestrogens can lock into the estrogen receptors on cells and basically bind to those cells and tell the cells that there's estrogen there. So if you think about it, this is really adding on to our estrogen load. So this can really cause estrogen dominant conditions in women, knock off our natural hormone balance, but also men shouldn't have these estrogens in their body. Men should have very little estrogen. So these xenoestrogens are really potentially having a negative impact on both men and women. So where do we find estrogens? And basically a lot of these things that we're exposed to on a daily basis. Plastics, especially plastics that have been heated or exposed to acids, nail varnish and nail varnish removers. I would say, your number one step if you're trying to reduce your exposure to chemicals is get rid of nail varnish, gel nails, detergents and fabric softeners. So dry cleaning detergents are a big source of xenoestrogens, perfumes and fragrances, bleached feminine hygiene products. So your sanitary protection can be a source of these chemicals. Products that are used in contraception, fumes from new carpets, certain floorings and floorboards, so like PVC flooring, obviously, dry cleaning chemicals, gases from copiers and printers. So the printer paper or receipts are a big source of xenoestrogens, and all pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides, so chemicals that are on non-organic fruits and vegetables. So a big list there. And I like to talk about the P's of hormone disruptors. This helps us identify all of them. So pesticides on non-organic fruit and veg, plastics, especially BPA, but other plastics as well, even those that claim to be BPA free. Perfumes, so that includes your cosmetic perfume and air fresheners, parabens and phthalates as well. So these are your P's of the hormone disrupting chemicals that we want to reduce exposure to. So we obviously ingest these hormone disruptors in our food. And this can come from pesticides. It can come from plastics used in food storage, such as cling film, or the plastic in food containers contains BPA and plastic water balloons, and convenience foods. So think about the soft plastic that you get microwave meals in, that you're then heating in a microwave. That is going to release a lot of plastic into your food, or food that has been stored long term in plastic, especially anything very acidic or fatty. So I will never buy cooking oil that is stored in plastic. Even my extra virgin olive oil, even if it was organic, I would not buy that oil that is in a plastic container, because that will have leached. Plastic will leach a lot into oily substances, and a lot of that plastic will have leached into that oil. Non-stick pans, such as Teflon pans, is known as PFOA, and that is a really strong chemical that is known to reduce fertility. And tap water, there can be hormone residues in our food. So we're getting a lot of these chemicals through our food. BPA, so this is bisphenol A, a really known disturber of fertility. It's the plastic found in plastic bottles and soft plastics. It has been extensively studied for its impact on hormone balance. So we know that when BPA levels were measured in men's urine, those men who had higher levels of BPA were found to have lower sperm count. Levels of BPA in women's urine were associated with reduced fertility. At Harvard University, they studied the impact of BPA on fertility and found that BPA can promote hormonal imbalances from the pituitary and actually interfere with good ovulation. Eggs exposed to BPA during maturation had double the amount of chromosomal abnormalities, and exposure of eggs to BPA decreased the percentage of eggs that matured and increased the percentage of eggs that degenerated. And we also know that BPA increases insulin resistance and interferes with thyroid health. So there other ways it can interfere with potentially our ability to regulate our weight and good weight balance. And we get so many chemicals in our cosmetics. Cosmetics tend to contain two of the main hormone disruptors, phthalates and parabens. Phthalates have been recognized as a reproductive toxin by the European Union, but so far have only been banned in children's toys. Exposure to phthalates negatively impacts egg development and suppresses production of estrogen by follicular cells. Levels of phthalates are linked to poorer outcomes in assisted conception. They can also lower testosterone levels in men and diminish sperm count. And parabens can mimic the action of estrogen and therefore can promote hormonal imbalance and estrogen dominant conditions. So parabens and phthalates, two to really look out for. And where are they coming from? So they're going to be in anything that is perfumed. Phthalates are used in anything really that's fragranced. So fabric softeners, food containers, perfumes, nail polish, and anything fragranced. Some companies do sell phthalate-free nail varnish, but I would say that no nail varnish is going to be low chemical. If a plastic product is flexible, it probably contains PVC, a phthalate. And if you want to prioritize avoiding anything in your environment, avoid nail varnish, air freshener, and perfume. So perfume should really, if you're trying to conceive, trying to boost your fertility, should only be used for special occasions, in my opinion. And I don't know if some people have seen some of those videos that go around social media, and they say that a lot of the fertility clinics actually ban their members of staff from wearing perfume because it's known to damage like embryos whenever they're being sort of cultured. Parabens are the most commonly used chemical in cosmetics, and you'll find them in deodorants, shampoo, shower gel, skincare, makeup, and sun cream. And interestingly, female personal care. So tampons and sanitary pads contain bleaches, plastics, synthetic fragrance, and pesticides. And in South Korea, they found cancer-causing toxins were found in 94% of sanitary products. The vaginal wall is highly permeable, and many of these substances are potentially absorbed into your bloodstream from the sanitary protection. So we want to look for organic and chlorine-free tampons, pads, or even consider a silicone moon cup as an alternative. You can also buy period pants, but do be careful because some of those brands do contain plastic. So do your research and look out for brands that are completely natural. So how do you actually make lasting change that you can reduce your exposure to chemicals and have a positive impact? So try to buy organic food when possible, but not always possible. Wash vegetables and fruit thoroughly with a vegetable wash, or you can use bicarbonate of soda or apple cider vinegar. Local vegetable delivery services can be really good value. Get rid of your plastic containers, throw them all out. Reuse old glass jars for food storage, or try and replace plastic containers with glass. IKEA do really good glass containers. If using cling film, make sure it doesn't touch the food, or you could try beeswax wrap. So if you are putting things in a glass bowl, make sure the cling film is over the top, but not actually touching the food. Get rid of plastic bottled water, avoid that completely. I always say to people, we don't know how long that water has been in that plastic bottle, and you don't know if that plastic bottle has ever been exposed to a lot of heat that would have caused that plastic to leach into the water. Even if it's in the fridge when you get it, it could have been exposed to a lot of heat at some point in transit. So just avoid completely. Use a refillable stainless steel or glass bottle and buy a filter jug, or use at home and filter tap water. We actually in our house have a little filter that actually goes directly on our tap. It's actually by a company called TAPP, and you attach that to your water tap in your kitchen. So you can actually kind of toggle between normal water from your normal tap, or it gets diverted through the filter, and it seems to be really excellent. We've had that now for about 6 months, and it's been fantastic. And also look at your cooking materials. If you're using non-stick pans, take care to not use at high heat, when the plastics will become volatile and release chemicals. There's a good brand called Green Pan that makes alternative non-stick that aren't chemical. And there's that brand I see, I don't own any of them, but they see like the only pan that you can see on social media that seem to be very good at like being low chemical, but still non-stick. And just a few brands that I would love and I've found to be very good over the years that are clean. However, there is a really great website you can use called the Environmental Working Group, and it's the Skin Deep database. So you can go to that database and put in the name and the brand of any of your products, or maybe if you want to buy something new, and before you buy it, you can check the rating, and it'll give it like a green or an amber or a red. So you can choose, you know, that you want to buy most of your things green, maybe the odd one or two amber, but try and make sure you can use this website to make sure that you're not using highly chemical products. So I like Faith in Nature for shower gel, shampoos, soaps. Evolve Beauties, where I get my fake tan from. Antipodes is another really great brand for skincare. Dr. Hauschka as well. Sukin, fantastic for shampoo and body wash. Weleda, another fantastic one. Neom or Tisserand for essential oils and candles. So you should be really chucking out any of your reed diffusers, your Glade plugins, your Yankee candles. Those are a huge source of chemicals in your home environment. You can replace them with, like, I have an ultrasonic diffuser and I use organic essential oils from Tisserand or Neom. And yes, they're a little bit more expensive, but if you've got a birthday coming up, or, you know, someone wants to buy you a present, just go, can I be cheeky and ask you to buy me something like this? Brands I've started using recently are Rose Ink for makeup. Seems really good. I really like it so far. Or the brand Rare, which is actually the actress Selena Gomez, is her makeup range. They're all both really low chemical, most of their products. Mad Hippie is a fantastic brand for skincare. If you use like a vitamin C serum or retinol serum, those serums are really good from that brand. I use their products. And there is a good product if you do like gel nails and you do want to do your nails occasionally for a special occasion, called Manicurist. And they have very low chemical gel nails. Now, obviously, there's still going to be some chemicals there, but if you want to have your nails done for a special occasion, take it off immediately. That would be my go-to brand. If you've got a wedding coming up or something, there are ways around it, you know, to reduce your exposure. Use a good brand of low chemical gel nails and remove them straight away. Don't leave them on until they've grown off, you know, like we used to. So again, another massive detour. I just wanted to chat a little bit about the microbiome, because this is something I talk about a lot with my fertility clients, and it's something we never really ignore nowadays. So I want to finish by talking a bit about the microbiome, the population of good bacteria that's in our gut, but not just in our gut, in our vagina and in our mouth. I've mentioned the importance of a healthy microbiome a few times in relation to weight balance, and how a healthy gut microbiome can support blood sugar balance and our insulin sensitivity. However, a healthy microbiome also plays a crucial role in fertility health. So how does our microbiome support fertility? So the gut microbiome, that good bacteria that's in our gut, can support our reproductive health through a number of mechanisms. It balances our immune health. So the majority of our immune system is in our gut, and that immune system communicates with the gut microbiome, and that really supports something called immune tolerance. It makes our immune system more tolerant, and immune tolerance is really important for fertility and reproductive health and supporting conception. The gut microbiome reduces systemic inflammation, which can interfere with fertility. It supports absorption of nutrients from our diet, which is obviously important for optimizing our intake of good food and either those appropriate nutrients for fertility. It can support the nervous system and balance stress levels. It can also support sleep. We produce a lot of neurotransmitters in the gut, and the gut-brain connection is very strong for balancing and reducing anxiety. And it also helps to process and metabolize female hormones. So there's a portion of the gut microbiome called the estrobolome that helps to break down and metabolize estrogen. So you can see here 5 really key ways, 5 key areas that are important for our fertility health, all supported by the gut microbiome. And factors that could have maybe had a negative impact on your gut microbiome over the years can be, have you had your gallbladder removed? Have you had a history of a lot of antibiotic use? Did you use antibiotics for acne as a teenager? Did you suffer with chronic tonsillitis as a child? Were you a C-section baby? All these are factors that could have depleted a healthy gut microbiome. Beyond our gut microbiome, however, we also have the vaginal microbiome and the oral microbiome. And men have a microbiome in their semen. And the health of these microbiomes has been shown to be really important for our fertility. Strange as it may seem, the oral microbiome in there, it is true. There's a really close connection between your oral microbiome and your fertility health. So start with the vaginal microbiome. So the vaginal microbiome can positively impact fertility by supporting both implantation and long-term fertility outcomes as well. So our vaginal microbiome should be dominated by lactobacillus bacteria, and these are acid-producing bacteria that can make the environment of the vaginal environment a bit more acidic, which is actually beneficial for conception and implantation. An abundance of lactobacillus help prevent overgrowth of bad bacteria that can promote inflammation in the vaginal area. So if we've got lots of the good bacteria, it stops those bad bacteria that can be pro-inflammatory from taking hold and colonizing our vaginal area. Research has shown that a lack of good lactobacillus bacteria in the vaginal microbiome and colonization with bad bacteria or yeasts or even mycoplasmas can negatively impact fertility outcomes. Recurrent miscarriage was associated with bacterial vaginosis, which can be asymptomatic. So I screen with a lot of my clients, and we often do vaginal microbiome testing. And this is really important, in my opinion, for preparing for trying to conceive naturally, or if you're going to be having assisted conception. And I have had a lot of clients come back with test results that show that they have asymptomatic bacterial vaginosis. So their microbiome's out of balance, their inflammatory markers are elevated, and they haven't had any symptoms. And it could be strep B, Prevotella vivia, all these bad bacteria are present there, but there's no symptoms, and you often don't have enough of the lactobacillus. More of a bacteria called Lactobacillus crispatus was associated with successful pregnancy. So this is a really interesting way that we can support our fertility health. Signs that your vaginal microbiome might be out of balance could be frequent thrush, or do you get thrush every time you're on an antibiotic? If you get frequent UTIs, because the vaginal microbiome is very closely linked to the health of the bladder. Are you getting discharge? Do you get some discomfort during sex? But as I said, many people are asymptomatic. I have had many clients that don't have any symptoms. And when we do this test, we find that they have sort of an imbalance in their vaginal microbiome that we have to treat and try and rebalance. And the oral microbiome. So this might sound strange, but the oral microbiome plays a really key role in reproductive health. So we have a population of good bacteria in our mouth. Actually, we should have, but many of us don't for various reasons. An increasing body of research has linked poor oral health, like periodontitis, inflammation in your gums, gingivitis, with poor fertility outcomes for both men and women. And this is because inflammation within the mouth can contribute to systemic inflammation throughout the body. And men with periodontitis have been shown to have reduced sperm health. Our oral microbiome is also closely linked to production of something called nitric oxide. So if we have a healthy oral microbiome, it helps optimize production of something called nitric oxide. And poor oral health is driven by an imbalance in the microbiome in the mouth. So if you have gingivitis, plaque, periodontitis, it's likely that you have an imbalance in the good bacteria in your mouth. You've got an overgrowth of bad bacteria. And this can contribute to a low-grade inflammatory state throughout the body. So you can get entrance from the gums and the oral cavity into your bloodstream. The good bacteria that reside within the mouth should produce a substance called nitric oxide if you have enough of them. And nitric oxide has a number of key functions in fertility. Some of you might be familiar with knowing about nitric oxide and how that can promote sort of, some people try to optimize nitric oxide in the weeks before embryo transfer. Nitric oxide is really beneficial for our fertility because it promotes vasodilation of our blood vessels, and this improves delivery of both oxygen and nutrients to our reproductive organs. Improved blood flow to the organs will not only improve sperm and egg quality because you're getting more oxygen, more nutrients to these sperm and egg cells, but also potentially helps to support implantation. It can really help promote development of a really good environment for implantation of embryos. Nitric oxide levels begin to deplete as we get older. So it can be really important to try and do things to optimize nitric oxide. So if your oral microbiome is out of balance, you could be negatively impacting your nitric oxide levels. So how do you support our microbiomes? So the vaginal microbiome can be supported with a variety of fermented foods, the good bacteria levels, and even some cultures, they actually rub fermented sort of foods like kefir and yogurt, and will actually apply it topically in and around their vagina, or even like try and douche with it as well. Use natural and unfragrant soaps and body care in the intimate area, because fragrances can wipe out your natural microbiome. Avoid smoking or vaping because nicotine disturbs the microbiome. And try and use an appropriate probiotic, or test your microbiome to find out what's going on there. What is the health of your vaginal microbiome? I would also say that whenever I'm working with clients, when I test the vaginal microbiome, we will also then, you can't really test the seminal microbiome, the microbiome of the semen, because there's no real, there isn't a really very good accurate test to do that right now. But often we'll have to then treat the partner's microbiome as well, because if you're having unprotected sex and you're trying to conceive, I would be afraid that my clients, if they have sort of they've had an overgrowth of yeast, or mycoplasma, their partner could then be reinfecting them. And it can be very difficult to get the back in balance if they're having regular unprotected sex. So you can get this kind of cross-contamination from the male partner and the female partner when you are trying to conceive. So it's really important to consider both partners in the couple. And how do we support our oral microbiome? So really interestingly, you want to avoid mouthwash, especially antibacterial mouthwashes, even if you have been prescribed them by your dentist, because these antibacterial mouthwashes are actually wiping out your good bacteria, and that is reducing the chances of you producing nitric oxide. So any of those mouthwashes you're using that actually contain alcohol, you want to move away from those. There's a really great website called Ask the Dentist, and this dentist is a functional dentist from the States. He has some great recipes for like natural mouthwashes that you can make using matcha green tea and things. So if you do want to use mouthwash, if you like to use it to support your oral health, that's good. But try and move away from alcohol-containing mouthwash. Avoid fluoride in toothpaste. So try and use a toothpaste containing hydroxyapatite instead. You do not need fluoride to maintain the health of your teeth. Hydroxyapatite is even more effective. And again, this Ask the Dentist, or you can find quite a few functional dentists on social media that can recommend toothpaste, or if you want to DM me, I can recommend the one that I use as well. Tongue scraping can really support the balance in your oral microbiome. Coconut oil pulling. And again, this Ask the Dentist website, he has a really good recipe for like coconut oil pulls that can really, so pulling with coconut oil on a regular basis is very good for regularly supporting oral health, and it's very good for whitening your teeth as well. And try an oral probiotic if you've got periodontitis or gingivitis, because that's a sign that your oral microbiome is out of balance. So a few key steps there that you could put in place.